Okay, so now I want to talk about adding and subtracting square roots. And so if you have, two square roots that are the same, so the square root of a plus the square root of a, it's just like you're counting them. You have one here and one here, so you add them together, and you have 2 times the square root of a. It's like 1 apple plus 1 apple. Okay, so let's say you have some numbers in there. Let's say you have 3 square root 5 plus 8 square root 5. So how many square root 5s do you have? You have 11 of them. Now if you want to see this, you could think about, well, isn't that like if I were to factor out the common square root part, I'd have 3 plus 8 times the square root of 5, like the opposite of distributing. And that's going to give you 11 square root 5. So that might make some sense to you. I wasn't going to talk really about factoring, but you could think of it that way. It's the opposite of the distributive property here. Okay. But let's say you had something like the square root of 5 plus the square root of 7. You can't combine those. Okay, you're done. They're not the same radical, and you can't combine them. Okay? Now we'll do some examples to show you more. Okay, so here we have 7 square root 2 plus 5 square root 2. So are the radicals the same? Is the radical part the same in both parts there? Yes. So that means you can add the 7 and the 5, and you're going to have 12, and you're still going to have the square root of 2. That's what you're counting. It's like you had 7 square root 2's on a row, and then you had 5 square root 2's on another row. So altogether you have 12 square root 2's, like 12 pencils or 12 apples or something like that. We haven't done any subtraction, but here's one. So you look at the radical part. Is this radical the same as this radical? Is the square root part the same? Yes. Now, there's not a 1 here, but you could put 1 in, if that helps you. So what I want to know is what's 1 minus 7, and that's going to be times the square root of 5x. So it's subtraction. I wouldn't normally write this out, but I just want to show it to you. What's 1 minus 7? It's going to be negative 6, right? So we talked about that. If you're having trouble with some of the math, there is a support class for Math 10, so you could join that. All right, now here we want to add or subtract, but notice this radical is not the same as this radical. It's not, but maybe it could be. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite the problem. 7 square root 3 plus the square root of 12. But 12 is 4 times 3, right? And I can take the square root of 4. So if I were to simplify that radical first, then maybe I'd have something. So I get 7 square root 3 plus, now the square root of 4 is going to be 2. So it's going to be 2 square root 3. Sometimes I kind of write it like this instead of writing out all the radical stuff. But whatever works best for you. Okay, now are the radicals the same? Yes, they're both square root 3's, so you can add the 7 and you can add the 2 and get 9 square root 3. So it looked like we couldn't add them, but it turned out we really could. So let's see if something similar happens over here. The radicals aren't the same, but could we simplify them? Well, let's see if we can. 4 times 50x. The 50 is 25 times 2, right? Minus 6, and then we have 32x. I'm just rewriting the problem there. But 32 is 16 times 2, which, okay, that's pretty handy because 25, I could take the square root of that, which is going to be 5. Now notice when I write it, I have 4. The 5 is going to come out, so 4 times 5. And then what's left inside the radical? The 2 and the x, 2x. So that takes a little bit of getting used to, but hopefully that makes sense and you can do it that way. Or if you need more writing, there's other ways you could write it. All right, on the other part, you've got minus 6, but the 16, that I'm going to take the square root of, times 4, and then what's left inside? 2 and x, okay? So this is looking pretty good because the radical parts are the same. But I do need to do the multiplying. So 20 radical 2x minus 24, I can say square root 2x, either way. Okay, now that I can do some subtraction. And I'm thinking, what's 20 minus 24? Negative 4 square root 2x. You don't forget that negative sign. Okay,